The day the world ended for Alara, it didn't arrive with fire or flood, but with a cold, formal envelope slipped under her front door. The date was October 26th, a day she'd always considered an unremarkable Tuesday. On this day, her husband, Malachi, the man she had loved since college, filed for divorce. The accusations were a hammer blow: failed spouse and inept mother. He wasn't just demanding freedom, he was demanding everything: the house, the savings, and most cruelly, sole custody of their 7-year-old daughter, Serafina. The scene was the family court, a room of sterile walls and unforgiving light. Alara sat beside her pro bono attorney, Mr. Abernathy, her hands clenched so tightly her knuckles were white. Malachi, immaculate in a tailored suit, sat opposite with his slick, high-priced lawyer, Attorney Cromwell. The air was thick with tension, a battleground of bitter whispers and legal jargon. Just as Attorney Cromwell rose to present his opening statement, detailing Alara's supposed failures, a small voice cut through the silence. It was Serafina, standing between her parents' lawyers, wearing a simple white dress and holding a small, old tablet. She looked directly at the judge. "Your Honor," her voice was surprisingly steady for a 7-year-old, "can I please show you something my mommy doesn't know about?" The entire courtroom froze. Malachi's face, moments before etched with smug confidence, went pale. Attorney Cromwell started to object, but the judge, intrigued, silenced him with a wave of his hand and a simple, "Proceed, young lady." Serafina took a small step forward, her eyes never leaving the judge's face. She raised the old, cracked-screen tablet, the one Alara thought she'd forgotten about, and pressed the play button. The lights dimmed slightly as the screen came to life and the first frame of the video appeared. A hush fell over the room. Everyone in the courtroom, including the judge, leaned forward, transfixed by the shocking sight. What was on that screen was about to rip through Malachi's carefully constructed lies and expose the cold, calculated deceit at the heart of the divorce. Before the rest of Alara's story unfolds, please take a moment to drop a comment below and tell us which state or city you're tuning in from. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring you more captivating and emotional stories like this one. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next chapter. The morning before the divorce papers arrived had begun like 1,000 others. Alara had been in the kitchen since 5:30 a.m., dressed in a faded apron over her simple clothes. The soft glow of the stovetop reflected in her tired eyes as she prepared Malachi's specific breakfast: 2 poached eggs, avocado toast, and a glass of fresh orange juice, all while the washing machine hummed in the adjacent laundry nook. She moved with practiced silence, a shadow in her own luxurious, custom-built home. Years of living with Malachi had taught her that noise was an intrusion and a lack of peace was a potential fault. At 6:15 a.m., Malachi descended the grand, spiral staircase. He was always impeccable, a stark contrast to Alara's weary appearance. His freshly pressed suit looked expensive, his movements clipped and efficient. As soon as he was seated, Alara silently placed the hot black coffee and the steaming breakfast plate before him. Malachi didn't look up, his attention was fixed on the latest model smartphone, the screen reflecting in his glasses. He took a sip of the coffee. "This is weak," he stated flatly, his voice devoid of emotion, a comment about the coffee but a judgment on her. "I'm so sorry, honey. I thought I measured the new grounds right," Alara replied, her voice barely a whisper, a familiar wave of shame washing over her. He simply shrugged, pushed the breakfast plate slightly away, and took a single, uninterested bite of the toast before returning to his phone. Alara stood near the table, a nervous, expectant sentinel waiting for any further command. The silence between them was the sound of a glacier, dense, cold, and slow-moving. It had been years since a morning breakfast included laughter. Ever since Malachi's business expanded, his trips lengthened and his coldness deepened. "Is Serafina ready?" Malachi asked, not lifting his gaze. "Yes, darling, she's just finishing up in the shower. She'll be down any minute," Alara answered. True to her word, a light, rhythmic tapping of small feet soon echoed down the stairs. Serafina, their 7-year-old, appeared in her crisp private school uniform, a beacon of pure joy in the desolate atmosphere. Her smile was blindingly bright. "Good morning, Mommy and Daddy." Serafina rushed to Alara, giving her a quick, fierce hug and a kiss on the cheek before turning to her father. Malachi finally set his phone down, forcing a brief, mechanical smile. "Good morning, princess. Eat up. Daddy's going to drive you to school today." "Wow. I get to go with Daddy," Serafina squealed, her eyes wide with delight. Alara let out a small, silent breath of relief. For Serafina's sake, Malachi always managed to summon a sliver of warmth. This rushed breakfast was the only semblance of family time they had left. The moment Serafina finished her last spoonful of yogurt, Malachi stood up, grabbed his sleek briefcase, gave Serafina a perfunctory kiss on the top of her head, and headed straight for the front door. He walked past Alara as if she were a piece of furniture, no goodbye, no glance, no touch. Only the roar of his luxury sedan pulling out of the driveway minutes later confirmed she was completely, utterly alone in the cavernous house once more. Alara spent the rest of the morning in her routine, clearing the dishes, scrubbing the countertops, folding the laundry, and tidying the rooms. Every chore was done with desperate efficiency. She had long ago internalized the belief that if the house was perfect enough, if the meals were delicious enough, if she was quiet enough, then perhaps the old Malachi, the man who loved her, would somehow return. But that man seemed to have vanished into a distant memory, replaced by the ghost in the suit who now resided here. At noon, Alara went to pick up Serafina from school, the brightest spot in her day. She cherished the ride home, listening to Serafina's eager chatter about her friends, her latest art project, or the mystery meet in the lunch line. "Mommy, I got a superstar sticker today. I was the only one who knew the answer," Serafina chirped, swinging her mother's hand. "Oh, my clever girl," Alara replied, genuinely proud, gently squeezing her daughter's nose. As they arrived back home, Alara was helping Serafina take off her backpack when the loud, sputtering sound of a motorcycle pulled up to the front door. A courier in a fluorescent vest yelled her name. "Alara, package for you." Alara frowned. She hadn't ordered anything. She walked to the door and received a large, thick brown envelope. There was no sender name, only the cold, impersonal logo of a major city law firm stamped in the upper right corner. A cold dread, a feeling she couldn't name, began to pulse in her chest. "What is it, Mommy?" Serafina asked, having followed her to the hallway. "I don't know, Princess, probably just some boring junk mail. Go get changed and we'll have a snack," Alara said, trying to keep the tremor from her voice. After Serafina ran off to her room, Alara sat heavily on the living room sofa. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably as she tore open the thick envelope. Inside, a daunting stack of legal papers sat. The very first sentence on the top page made her entire world tilt, stealing the air from her lungs. "Petition for dissolution of marriage." Her ears began to ring. Divorce. She reread the words, convinced her eyes were playing tricks on her. Plaintiff, Malachi; defendant, Alara. Reason for the suit: the wife has totally failed in the fulfillment of her marital and parental duties. Failed, the word echoed in her mind. She had surrendered her burgeoning career at his request, managed every detail of this house, and poured her entire soul into raising Serafina. What did he mean by failed? She blindly flipped through the following pages. Her vision blurred over the demands. They were beyond cruel. Malachi was not only asking for a divorce but also full custody of Serafina, arguing that Alara was emotionally volatile and incapable of providing a stable environment for their child. And then came the most devastating demand: the totality of the marital assets, including the house itself, based on the argument that Alara had made zero financial contribution and that all wealth was solely the result of Malachi's business acumen. Alara collapsed, a weightless shell, onto the cold hardwood floor. The papers scattered around her like autumn leaves. This was it. This explained the months of coldness, the distance, the utter lack of communication. This had all been a secret, meticulously planned operation to destroy her life. The front door suddenly opened. Malachi, he had returned from work unusually early. He stood in the doorway, his eyes sweeping from Alara, a pathetic figure huddled on the floor, to the scattered, accusing documents. His expression was utterly cold, devoid of any guilt. "Honey, what does this mean?" Alara's voice was a shaky string of sound, and tears instantly began to stream down her face. Malachi calmly took off his shoes and loosened his tie. He didn't deny it, he didn't apologize, he didn't explain. He simply walked past her and said in a voice that was pure ice, "It means exactly what you read, Alara. I don't want to live with you anymore. You have failed as a wife and as a mother. Failed." She wailed, clutching a handful of the papers. "I took care of this house, I raised Serafina, I gave up everything." "Taken care of the house?" Malachi scoffed, a sneer twisting his perfect lips. "The only thing you've done is spend my money and wallow in self-pity." Serafina needs a competent mother, a strong one, not someone who cries and complains all the time like you. "But the property, this house and Serafina, Malachi, you can't just take them from me." Alara began to scream, her control finally snapping. She scrambled backwards on the floor, trying to escape his presence. Malachi crouched down, his expression hardening into a look of sharp, visceral hatred that Alara had never seen before, a look that belonged to a stranger. "I can and I will, Alara," he hissed, his voice dangerously low. "My attorney has gathered all the evidence. You will walk out of this house without a single dollar." He then stood up, smoothing down his expensive suit jacket as if brushing away dust, and looked toward the staircase, ensuring Serafina was nowhere near. He turned back to Alara, and a chilling grin, a true predator's smile, froze her blood. "And get ready," he drawled. "My lawyer is confident that even your own daughter will testify in court about how incompetent you are as a mother." Alara's world shattered. She froze in pure terror, the physical and financial destruction suddenly secondary to this new, grotesque betrayal. Malachi didn't just want a divorce, he wanted to annihilate her, to poison the last shred of love she held dear. Alara didn't sleep that night. After the cruel confrontation, Malachi had retreated to the guest suite on the other side of the house, locking the door as if she were a physical threat. Alara spent the night in Serafina's room, curled up in the armchair by the window, watching her daughter's peaceful face illuminated by the moonlight. Her tears were a relentless, silent torrent. How could Malachi claim Serafina would testify against her? Serafina was her whole world. What lies had they twisted to plant such venom in her little girl's mind? That thought tormented her more than any accusation of failure. The next morning, Malachi behaved as if nothing had transpired. He woke Serafina, helped her get ready for school, a sudden, unusual display of paternal devotion, and took her out of the house. He spoke not a word to Alara. When Serafina, her small face creased with confusion, asked why her mother's eyes were so puffy, Malachi answered with an indifferent lie, "Mommy isn't feeling very well, princess. She needs a lot of rest." After they left, true terror gave way to fierce resolve. Alara couldn't simply surrender Serafina. She had to fight. She grabbed her phone and desperately searched for names of renowned divorce lawyers in the city, but the harsh reality hit her instantly. Lawyers demanded retainers, consultation fees, and significant amounts of money just to start. Alara realized with sickening clarity that she had no money. For all these years, Malachi had given her a tightly budgeted monthly allowance, meticulously accounted for groceries and Serafina's school expenses. There was never any room to save. Her only hope was their joint savings account, the one she believed was their secure family emergency fund. With trembling hands, Alara opened the banking app. She entered the password, her heart hammering against her ribs. When the balance finally appeared on the screen, her legs failed her. $0, zero, it couldn't be. There should have been hundreds of thousands of dollars in that account, the fruits of Malachi's supposed tireless labor. Alara repeatedly refreshed the screen, praying for a system error, but the cruel number 0 stared back, mocking her desperation. She opened the transaction history. Her eyes widened with horror as she scrolled. Over the past 6 months, Malachi had systematically drained the account, moving colossal sums into another account she didn't recognize or have access to. The final withdrawal had been made just 3 days ago, emptying the remaining balance. Malachi hadn't just been planning to leave, he had deliberately crippled her financially to ensure she couldn't afford to fight back. Alara sobbed in pure despair. How was she going to hire an experienced lawyer without a single dollar to her name? She remembered her wedding jewelry, the few valuable heirlooms her mother had given her. She ran to the bedroom and frantically opened her velvet jewelry box. It was empty. Only a few insignificant costume trinkets remained. Malachi had taken even her heirlooms, stripping her down to nothing. In her absolute desperation, Alara remembered an old college acquaintance, Lee, who worked at a local legal aid agency. She called Lee, recounting the entire situation between gasping sobs. Lee, sympathetic but constrained by the agency's rules, couldn't take the case but gave Alara one name. "His name is Attorney Abernathy," Lee said softly. "He has a small office on the second floor of an old strip mall. He isn't fancy or expensive, but he is honest and dedicated to the underdog. Go see him, Alara, explain your situation, maybe he can help you." Alara had no other choice. With the last bit of cash she had left in her purse, enough for a taxi, she hailed a ride and headed to the address Lee gave her. Attorney Abernathy's office was exactly as described, small, modest, and located up a flight of stairs in a decaying building with peeling paint. Attorney Abernathy himself was a middle-aged man with kind, tired eyes behind thick-rimmed glasses and a calm, deliberate demeanor. He listened patiently to Alara's fractured, tearful story without interrupting, only nodding occasionally and taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When Alara finished, the room was silent. Attorney Abernathy exhaled a long, heavy sigh. "Alara, this is going to be an uphill battle," he said in a quiet voice. "Your husband has prepared all of this very thoroughly. He doesn't just want a divorce, he wants to destroy your standing completely. I know, attorney, but I truly don't care about the money or the house. I just want Serafina," Alara pleaded, leaning forward desperately. "Please help me. I don't have money now, but I will pay you. I will pay in installments. I will do anything you ask." Attorney Abernathy looked at her long and hard. Let's leave the money issue for later, Alara. What is important now is that we move fast. This lawsuit has already been filed. We have to prepare a forceful response immediately. He left the small office and returned a few minutes later with a heavy folder full of photocopies, the lawsuit documents filed by Malachi's high-powered legal team. Your husband's lawyer is Attorney Cromwell, Abernathy stated firmly. He's known for being sharp, ruthless, and not hesitating to use dirty tactics. Let's see what evidence they have presented against you. Alara nodded, her heart pounding a heavy rhythm in her chest, dreading what they would find. Attorney Abernathy opened the folder. The first section contained photographs. Alara gasped. They were images of the interior of her house, but manipulated to look horrifying. Photos of dirty dishes piled high in the kitchen sink, photos of the living room cluttered with an abnormal amount of toys, and photos of laundry baskets overflowing with clothes. But this is unfair. Alara protested, tears springing back to her eyes. These are pictures he took when I was seriously sick. I had a high fever for 3 days and Malachi refused to help at all. He took them on purpose. I'm afraid this has been manipulated to make it look like you are a perpetually lazy, negligent person who fails to maintain the household, Attorney Abernathy said, his expression bitter. They turned to the next pages. They were credit card statements, a long, damning list of charges for luxury handbags, expensive jewelry, and dinners at exclusive, high-end restaurants. Purchases Alara had never made. That's not me, I never bought these things. Was it an additional card in your name? Asked Attorney Abernathy. Yes. An additional one. Malachi managed it. He told me to use it if I needed something, but he often took it, saying his main card was having issues. Alara trailed off, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. Oh my God, he set me up. Alara felt the world spin around her. She realized with a horrifying clarity that every small concession or moment of trust Malachi had offered over the last year, the emergency credit card, his convenient business trips, was actually a calculated component of his evil plan. Then Attorney Abernathy stopped at a thick, bound document near the end of the file. And this, Alara, is the most damaging thing they have, he said, his voice dropping. What is it, Attorney? It's the testimony of an expert witness, Abernathy replied, flipping the cover. A highly credentialed child psychologist. Attorney Abernathy handed the detailed report to Alara. She scanned it, her eyes widening. The document was written in cold, sterile, clinical terms. It stated that the psychologist had conducted covert observations of Alara's interactions with Serafina over a period of 3 months. The conclusion was a devastating indictment. Alara was emotionally unstable, neglected her daughter's fundamental needs, and was a detrimental maternal figure to Serafina's psychological development. The report concluded with a chilling recommendation: full custody to Malachi for the mental health and safety of the child. This is insanity. It makes no sense. Alara's voice shook violently. When was this observation done? I never met a psychologist. I never knew I was being watched. According to this report, Attorney Abernathy explained, looking grimly at her, the observation was conducted in public spaces, at the park, at the mall, and during your routine school pickups. She claims you were never aware. That's crazy. Serafina and I are always happy together. This is total defamation. Who is this psychologist? Alara demanded, clutching the paper until her fingers hurt. Attorney Abernathy flipped back the cover page of the report. Her name is Dr. Veronica Valen, he said. Here are all her professional credentials. She seems exceptionally professional and very convincing on paper. He looked at Alara seriously. Do you know this woman, Veronica Valen? Alara shook her head, bewildered, the tears returning in full force. No, attorney, I don't know her. I have never seen her in my life. The reality of living under the same roof with the man who was meticulously planning her total destruction was a silent, psychological hell. Malachi had not moved out. He had simply moved into the massive guest suite, locking her out of his life. Their once warm, vibrant house now felt like a frozen, mine-ridden battlefield, with emotional landmines hidden in every conversation. Alara had to live with her enemy, see him every morning, and pretend that everything was normal for Serafina's sake. Malachi executed his manipulative strategy flawlessly in front of their daughter. He suddenly became the best father in the world. He began coming home from work earlier than usual, something he hadn't done in years, and arrived bearing expensive, flashy gifts. One evening, he returned with a massive, brightly wrapped box featuring a popular cartoon princess. This is your brand new tablet, Serafina, Malachi exclaimed, sweeping the girl into an overly dramatic hug. It's the latest model, much better than that old, broken one you have. It has an incredible camera, and Daddy installed all the best new games for you. Serafina's eyes shone with predictable 7-year-old delight. Wow, thank you so much, Daddy. Ilara, who was quietly folding a pile of clothes in the corner of the living room, could only swallow hard, her heart aching with a profound, cold sadness. She knew exactly what Malachi was doing. He was cynically buying their daughter's loyalty, and she couldn't compete. She didn't have a single dollar to buy Serafina anything but essentials. "You see, princess," Malachi said, turning on the new tablet while casting a contemptuous sneer toward Ilara. "When you live with Daddy soon, you'll be able to get a brand new toy every single week, unlike some people who only know how to fold boring clothes." Ilara stopped folding mid-movement. A hot knot of anger and frustration tightened in her chest. She wanted to scream, to refute his poisonous implication, to call him the monster he was, but she couldn't in front of Serafina. If she displayed anger, it would only confirm Malachi's main accusation, that she was emotionally volatile and unstable. So Ilara kept her head bowed and continued folding, her silence the only shield against the venomous words filling the room. The psychological warfare continued daily. Malachi systematically undermined Ilara's authority as a mother. If Ilara prepared dinner, always home-cooked and healthy, Malachi would enter the kitchen, taste the food, and pronounce in front of Serafina, "Honey, this chicken is a little dry tonight, isn't it? It's okay. Tomorrow we'll order those gourmet takeout pizzas we like instead." If Ilara sat down, ready to help Serafina with her tricky math homework, Malachi would interrupt, his voice patronizing. "Let me do it, princess. The way mommy tries to teach you is just too complicated. You'll get confused." Ilara felt herself shrinking, becoming smaller and smaller, more and more invisible in her own home. She began, frighteningly, to doubt herself. Did she really cook badly? Was she really incapable of teaching her own daughter simple arithmetic? Malachi played his role too well, masterfully constructing a narrative that painted Ilara as an inept, useless woman. Serafina, caught squarely in the middle of this undeclared war, began to show subtle signs of confusion and distress. It was clear she loved her mother deeply, but she also basked in and enjoyed the lavish attention and expensive gifts from her father. Sometimes Serafina would cling to Ilara, seeking protection, but other times she seemed uncomfortable around her, especially after Malachi had spent time whispering things to her in private. One sleepless night, Ilara rose silently and walked down the hallway to Serafina's room, needing to reassure herself her daughter was okay. She gently pushed the door open. Serafina was sleeping deeply, curled up peacefully under her comforter. On her desk, prominently displayed, was the new, expensive tablet Malachi had bought her. But as Ilara quietly moved closer to tuck Serafina in, she noticed something odd. Serafina's small hand was clutching something tightly under her pillow. "It wasn't her favorite stuffed animal, Mr. Teddy." Ilara looked closely, her heart skipped a beat. It was Serafina's old tablet, the cheap, older model with the screen cracked in several places, the one Ilara had repeatedly told her not to play with for fear of the loose glass fragments. Ilara frowned deeply. Why would Serafina still keep this broken tablet? Why hide it under her pillow when the dazzling, new model sat untouched on the desk? Ilara couldn't understand. She dismissed it as simply a child's emotional attachment to an old toy. She returned to her room, her mind more confused and anxious than before. She didn't realize that the broken, old tablet, clutched beneath Serafina's pillow, held a devastating secret, a secret that was about to change the entire trajectory of her divorce case. The climax of Malachi's psychological manipulation occurred a few days later. Ilara was in the kitchen, excitedly waiting for Serafina to return from school. She had promised to bake her favorite chocolate chip cookies, the only small pleasure she could still afford, but an hour passed after dismissal time and Serafina didn't arrive. Ilara called the school. The administrator told her, with a casual tone that made Ilara's blood run cold, that Serafina had been picked up earlier by Malachi. Ilara's heart sank, hitting the floor with a dull thud. Malachi hadn't said a word to her. She called his phone repeatedly, the line ringing endlessly before going to voicemail. 2 hours passed, 3 hours passed. Ilara was almost hysterical with worry, pacing back and forth in the living room, tears of fear blurring her vision. It wasn't until 9:00 p.m. that she heard the distinctive rumble of Malachi's expensive car in the driveway. Serafina burst through the front door, laughing and carrying a massive, overflowing bag of souvenirs and cheap carnival toys from an amusement park. Behind her, Malachi walked in slowly, a smug, satisfied smirk plastered on his face. "Where have you been, Malachi? Why did you take Serafina without telling me? I was out of my mind with worry," Ilara shouted, her voice thick with residual panic and fresh rage. "Daddy took me to Wonderland Park, Mommy. It was so much fun. I got this giant stuffed unicorn," Serafina exclaimed happily, oblivious to the storm brewing. Malachi looked at Ilara with cold contempt. So what? I am her father. I have every right to take my own daughter wherever I please. Besides, you weren't doing anything important at home anyway. But you should have told me. That's called common decency. Why? So you could ruin our fun with your drama, your anxiety. It was then that Alara smelled it, a fragrance. It was a woman's perfume, soft and floral but entirely unfamiliar. The scent permeated Malachi's expensive linen shirt. It wasn't Alara's perfume, nor was it the cologne Malachi usually wore. Malachi, you. Malachi followed the direction of Alara's gaze, her frantic sniffing. He knew she had noticed. He didn't flinch. Instead, he smiled that cold, predatory smile. He waited until Serafina ran off to her room to excitedly unpack her new haul of toys. Alone, Malachi walked right up to Alara. His face was inches from hers, and his voice dropped to a low, venomous hiss. Did you finally notice? Did you really think I was going to live forever with a woman as boring and predictable as you? You are nothing compared to her. Alara took a stumbling step back, her hands flying to her mouth, stifling a gasp. There was another woman. All of this, the divorce, the coldness, the accusations, was nothing more than a grotesque, elaborate scheme to discard her and run off with his mistress. Who is she? Alara whispered, the question tasting like ash. None of your business, Malachi sneered. She is a successful, intelligent woman, a brilliant professional, someone who actually knows how to please a man unlike you. That night, Serafina came quietly into Alara's room. Mommy, why are you crying again? Alara wiped her tears away instantly, plastering on a weak smile. I'm okay, princess, just a little headache. Serafina looked at her mother with a look that Alara found impossible to decipher, a strange mix of concern and hesitant judgment. Are you really sick, Mommy? Daddy says that because you are sick, you are often very sad and angry. Daddy said that if I go live with him later, Mommy will be able to rest and get better. He says it's an act of kindness. Alara's heart utterly shattered. Malachi hadn't just poisoned the divorce proceedings, he had been systematically injecting poison into her little daughter's mind. He had manipulated Serafina into believing that leaving her mother's side was an act of charity, a way for Alara to recover from her imaginary illness. Alara hugged Serafina fiercely, holding on as if her life depended on it. Serafina, listen to me, I am not sick, I just love you so much, and I promise you I will never get angry or sad in front of you again. But the damage was already done. Alara saw a flicker of doubt, a shadow of hesitation in her daughter's eyes. Malachi, who had been lingering outside the doorway, listening to the entire conversation, only sneered in the darkness. He walked past Alara, who was still stunned by Serafina's words, and gave his wife's shoulder a mocking, theatrical tap of sympathy. Enjoy your time, Malachi mocked in a low whisper right into Alara's ear. Soon, she won't even want to call you Mom. The mandatory court-appointed mediation hearing felt like a cruel, twisted joke. Alara and Attorney Abernathy were seated in a small, stuffy conference room. The court mediator, a tired woman in a sensible suit, attempted to find some middle ground. Attorney Abernathy began with a measured, calm voice. Mr. Malachi, Alara isn't asking for much. She only wants custody of Serafina, or at the very least, shared joint custody. Regarding property, we are prepared to discuss a fair division. Before Abernathy could even finish the sentence, Attorney Cromwell, perfectly dressed and exuding expensive aggression, interrupted him with a harsh, dismissive tone. There is nothing to discuss, Attorney, Cromwell said sharply, slamming the heavy legal file he held onto the table. Our client's position is unambiguous. Alara is the failed party in this marriage. It has been proven she has failed in maintaining the home and raising the child. Our client demands full and immediate custody for Serafina's future well-being. Malachi sat beside him, his face blank and sorrowful, perfectly playing the part of the grieving victim. I only want the best for my daughter, he muttered with a tone of fake, wounded sadness. Taking her away from her unstable mother is unfortunately what's best for her. Attorney Cromwell chuckled, a dry, grating sound. Mrs. Alara, if you keep insisting, we will take this to a full-blown trial, and I assure you all the evidence we have will absolutely humiliate you. The photos, the credit card statements, the expert testimony. You would be wise to simply sign this agreement. Our client is being benevolent by allowing you to leave the house without facing a countersuit for his legal fees. Leave my house with nothing and without Serafina. Are you insane? Alara screamed, leaping to her feet. The mediator attempted desperately to intervene, but Malachi and his lawyer were immovable, unyielding in their demands. The mediation broke down completely, ending in a tense, hostile silence. Attorney Abernathy patted Alara gently on the shoulder as they left the room. Stay strong, Alara. The real fight begins now. The first day of the trial approached like a freight train. Alara had a constant, tight knot in her stomach. Abernathy had drilled her repeatedly. Keep calm at all costs, Alara. They want you to break. The courtroom was cold and intimidating, with high wooden walls, heavy, unforgiving chairs, and the judge's bench towering over them, looking authoritative and final. Malachi was sitting opposite her, looking utterly confident next to Attorney Cromwell. The trial began. Attorney Cromwell was first. He spoke fluently, his voice loud and utterly sure of itself. He presented his version of the facts, weaving a narrative of neglect and financial irresponsibility. Attorney Cromwell displayed the enlarged, damning photos of the messy house, dramatically accusing Alara of being a lazy and dirty housewife who created a hazardous environment. He then presented the lengthy credit card statements, painting Alara as wasteful and financially reckless. "Your Honor," Attorney Cromwell declared dramatically, sweeping his hand towards Malachi. "While my client Malachi worked tirelessly to earn the money, his wife Alara remained at home, shamefully wasting it and neglecting both her daughter and her domestic duties. We see a clear pattern of irresponsibility." Alara wanted to scream that it was all a lie, that Malachi had engineered the entire setup, that he was the one who used the card, and that he had taken the photos deliberately while she was incapacitated by fever. But the only thing she could do was clasp her hands tightly together beneath the table, her fingernails digging into her palms. Attorney Abernathy gave her a quick, reassuring shake of the head, a silent command to hold her peace. When it was Attorney Abernathy's turn, he did his best to refute the charges. He calmly explained that the photos were taken completely out of context, documenting a brief period of illness. He asserted that the credit card statements reflected charges made by Malachi himself on the secondary card. But his argument sounded weak and defensive. It was simply Alara's unverified word against the compelling physical evidence meticulously presented by Attorney Cromwell. The judge listened impassively, taking notes, his expression unreadable. Then came the moment Alara had dreaded most. "The plaintiff calls his expert witness," Attorney Cromwell announced, his voice ringing with confidence. "Dr. Veronica Valen, child psychologist." The courtroom door opened. Alara held her breath, her chest tight with anxiety. A woman entered. She was stunningly beautiful, elegantly dressed, with her hair pulled back in a neat, professional style, and she walked with an assured, confident stride. She didn't look like an evil person at all. She looked highly competent and terribly convincing. As the woman, Dr. Valen walked toward the witness box to take the oath, Alara caught a scent, the same soft floral perfume, the exact fragrance that had permeated Malachi's shirt that night he returned late from the amusement park. Alara's heart stopped. She gasped, a small, choked sound. It was her, Malachi's mistress. And she was posing as a child psychologist. Dr. Valen, perfectly composed, sat in the witness box. She began to speak calmly, her diction flawless, confidently using complex psychological terms that sounded both professional and overwhelmingly impressive to the court. "Yes, Your Honor, Dr. Valen began her testimony, answering Attorney Cromwell's leading question. "I conducted remote, natural observations of the interaction between Mrs. Alara and her daughter, Serafina, over a period of the last 3 months. And what were your conclusive findings, Doctor?" asked Attorney Cromwell, his voice dripping with gravitas. Dr. Valen opened her notes, a gesture that lent immediate authority to her lies. "My findings were extremely concerning. I found a clear pattern of behavior in Mrs. Alara that is highly inconsistent and emotionally volatile. There are significant signs of profound emotional distress that she is projecting onto the child." Dr. Valen began to meticulously detail the carefully constructed lies one by one, turning innocent facts into deadly professional weapons. "First observation," she stated, her voice steady. "At a large shopping mall, Mrs. Alara was observed to violently pull Serafina's arm, speaking to her loudly in a scolding manner which caused Serafina to cry publicly in fear. This indicates a severely low capacity for emotional regulation in the mother." Alara closed her eyes, remembering that horrible moment. Serafina had darted away, nearly throwing herself onto a moving escalator on the wrong side. Alara hadn't been angry. She had screamed and pulled Serafina back in sheer, paralyzing terror that her daughter would be gravely injured. "Serafina, be careful," she had shouted, but Dr. Valen had twisted this moment of maternal fear into verbal and emotional abuse. "Second observation," Dr. Valen continued, flipping a page. "In a public park, Mrs. Alara appeared to be entirely absorbed in her phone, actively ignoring Serafina, who was playing alone. When Serafina fell, Mrs. Alara did not notice the injury immediately. When she finally did, her reaction was overly exaggerated and tended toward hysteria, which further traumatized the child about the simple fall." Another calculated lie. Alara remembered that moment too. She had been quickly texting the long, specific grocery list Malachi had sent her. Serafina had tripped over a root, and Alara had been genuinely scared, running immediately to console her daughter with hugs and reassurances. Her reaction was that of a concerned mother, not a hysterical one. "My conclusion," Dr. Valen said, staring directly at the judge with unwavering composure, "is that Mrs. Alara demonstrably does not possess the stable emotional capacity required to raise a 7-year-old girl. There are strong, unmistakable signs of parentification syndrome, where Mrs. Alara subconsciously projects her own deep unhappiness and emotional failures onto the child. For Serafina's crucial mental health and stable development, I strongly and unequivocally recommend full custody for the father, Mr. Malachi, who is clearly the more stable and rational parental figure." A devastating silence descended upon the courtroom. Dr. Valen's testimony was extremely powerful, scientific, clinical, and utterly destructive to Alara's case. Alara wept silently, the tears pouring down her face. "It's a lie," she whispered desperately to Attorney Abernathy. "It's all a lie. She's Malachi's mistress. He brought her here." "Calm down, Alara," Attorney Abernathy replied tensely, pressing his hand onto her arm. "Do not react. That is exactly what they want you to do." Attorney Abernathy stood up for the cross-examination. He tried to chip away at the confidence of the witness. "Dr. Valen, are you certain you can make such severe, life-altering diagnoses based solely on observations conducted from a distance, without ever interviewing the mother or the child in a clinical setting?" Dr. Valen smiled slightly, a small, condescending twist of the lips. "On the contrary, counselor. Naturalistic observations conducted without the subject's knowledge are scientifically the most accurate. They capture the pure, unadulterated behavior. There is zero manipulation or pretense. You were paid handsomely by Mr. Malachi for this testimony, isn't that correct?" "I was paid for my professional services, counselor, Dr. Valen retorted cleverly, her voice never wavering. "Not for my conclusions. My conclusions are objective and based purely on field data." Attorney Abernathy was stuck. Dr. Valen had dodged his questions too well. She had anticipated every attack and covered all the holes in her fraudulent report. The trial adjourned for the day. Alara left the room with her legs shaking, feeling utterly destroyed. She saw Malachi smiling subtly, nodding approvingly at Dr. Valen, a look of profound satisfaction passing between them. In the lobby, Alara leaned against the cold wall and began to sob uncontrollably. "We lost, attorney, we lost. They have everything. The evidence, the money, and the liar." Attorney Abernathy remained silent for a long moment, watching Malachi and Dr. Valen walking away together in the distance, discreetly separated but still undeniably connected. "Not yet, Alara," Attorney Abernathy said in a low, tight voice. His eyes narrowed as he watched the couple. "I know something is fundamentally wrong here. The way she looks at him when she thinks no one is watching is not the way a professional psychologist looks at a high-paying client. That is intimacy." Attorney Abernathy turned to Alara, his voice suddenly sharp with renewed focus. "We have to find out who she really is. Not the paper trail identity, but the real woman." A few days before the next critical hearing, Attorney Abernathy called Alara urgently to his small office. His face looked visibly tired, the stacks of papers on his desk even higher than before. "Alara, I tried to trace her background," Abernathy stated, getting straight to the point. "The result is different from what we hoped." Alara's heart began to race wildly. "What do you mean, attorney? Her credentials are clean." "Almost too clean," sighed Attorney Abernathy, rubbing the bridge of his nose in frustration. "She is properly registered with the State Psychological Association. She has a registered practice clinic address. All the documentation supporting Dr. Veronica Valen is perfect." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "The truth is, either she is a genuine but completely corrupt psychologist whom Malachi hired to lie for an enormous sum of money, or Malachi spent months forging this entire professional identity with extraordinary cleanliness. We cannot attack her credibility by simply accusing her of being a fake. The court would instantly dismiss our claim without proof. The brief, fragile hope Alara had managed to cling to vanished instantly. So, we can't prove she's lying about being the mistress. No. We simply can't prove she isn't a psychologist in a court of law with the resources we have," Abernathy corrected gravely. "The only way forward is to refute her testimony on the stand, point by point, and that means you have to testify, Alara." Attorney Abernathy looked at her with serious intensity. "You have to tell your whole side of the story, about the staged photos, the misused credit cards, Malachi's months of calculated coldness, and his plan to take Serafina. Most importantly, you must not, under any circumstances, get emotionally upset. Attorney Cromwell will undoubtedly try his absolute best to provoke you. He wants you to look hysterical in front of the judge, confirming exactly what Dr. Valen described." Alara nodded silently, taking a deep, shuddering breath. I will do it, attorney, I promise I will try. The day arrived for Alara's testimony. She was terrified, but she held onto the image of Serafina's trusting face like a talisman. When she took the stand, the courtroom was packed, tense with anticipation. Attorney Abernathy led her through her initial testimony, allowing her to speak in a calm, measured voice. Alara began by detailing her marriage, her decision to leave her own career to raise Serafina at Malachi's insistence, and her role as a full-time, dedicated mother and homemaker. She then described the moment she received the divorce petition and the shock of seeing the evidence against her. She explained the staged photographs. Your Honor, those photos were taken by Malachi when I was bedridden with a serious illness. He refused to call a doctor or even help me with a glass of water, yet he had the presence of mind to meticulously stage those scenes for this lawsuit. She addressed the credit cards. Malachi provided me with that supplementary card, claiming it was for my use, but he consistently took it back. The purchases listed, the high-end jewelry, the extravagant dinners were not made by me. I believe, Your Honor, that they were made by Malachi himself or by the woman he is now involved with, the very woman who testified against me. The last statement caused an immediate, aggressive response from the opposing table. Objection, speculation. Your Honor, the witness is attempting to defame a reputable professional who is not on trial, Attorney Cromwell thundered, leaping to his feet. Sustained, the judge said immediately, glaring at Alara. Mrs. Alara, restrict your testimony to proven facts. Alara quickly apologized, but she could see Malachi's face, a flicker of anger mixed with fear that she was coming too close to the truth. Then Attorney Cromwell stood up for the cross-examination. He was a master of psychological pressure, and he zeroed in on his target instantly. Mrs. Alara, Cromwell began, his voice condescendingly smooth. Let's focus on your so-called contribution to the marriage. You admit you haven't held a paying job in 7 years, correct? Yes, at my husband's explicit request, Alara responded, her voice steady. A request that allowed you to live a life of comfort while he did all the work, isn't that fair to say? So in essence, you contributed nothing quantifiable to the marital estate, correct? My contribution was managing the home, raising our daughter, and supporting my husband's career. That is valuable work, Alara insisted, her voice beginning to strain against the pressure. Valuable, but not monetary, is it? Now, regarding your mothering skills, Dr. Valen testified that you are emotionally unstable, that you lost your temper and physically handled Serafina roughly at the mall, causing her to cry. Is that true? I was protecting my child from falling down an escalator, Your Honor. I raised my voice because I was terrified, not angry, Alara defended, fighting the rising panic. So you did shout at the child in public, Cromwell pressed, his voice rising sharply. And you did physically grab her arm hard enough to hurt her. I did what any mother would do in a moment of panic. Alara snapped, her voice breaking slightly. Ah, panic, Cromwell repeated, dragging the word out with heavy sarcasm. A perfect example of the volatility Dr. Valen described. Tell me, Mrs. Alara, why did Dr. Valen also report that you often ignore Serafina while you are absorbed in your phone, that you are self-absorbed and neglectful of her emotional needs? I was managing the household responsibilities Malachi demanded. I was texting his grocery lists. I was not ignoring my daughter, Alara cried, tears of sheer frustration finally welling up in her eyes. Cromwell smiled victoriously, turning immediately to the judge. Your Honor, I ask you to observe the witness. She is emotionally distraught, quick to anger, and she projects blame onto her husband. Exactly as the expert stated, this is the definition of an unstable parental environment. Alara wanted to lunge across the room and grab Cromwell by the lapels, but she gripped the sides of the witness box, forcing herself to stop crying. Attorney Abernathy knew they were losing the emotional war. He quickly changed the subject. Mrs. Alara, can you tell the court about Malachi's recent behavior toward Serafina, his sudden displays of affection? Alara took a moment to compose herself, wiping her eyes. He has been using lavish gifts to buy her affection, Your Honor, expensive toys, trips to amusement parks, a brand new expensive tablet, all while telling her I am sick and that she would be better off with him. Cromwell jumped up again. Objection, hearsay, and baseless accusation. Sustained, Mrs. Alara, that is conjecture. Alara felt the cold dread return. They had successfully painted her as unstable, and she had no concrete proof of Malachi's manipulation or the mistress's true identity. The only thing she had was her memory, her broken heart, and the faint, unsettling image of Serafina clutching that old broken tablet beneath her pillow. Why was that so important to her daughter? Alara shook her head, unable to offer any more evidence. She stepped down from the stand, feeling defeated, her head bowed in shame. That night, Alara couldn't sleep, tormented by the thought of Malachi's deceit and Serafina's growing confusion. She went into her daughter's room again. Serafina was fast asleep. Alara gently kissed her forehead. Her gaze fell again on the cheap, old tablet Malachi had deemed useless. It was still tucked under Serafina's pillow. Curiosity finally overcame her fear. Carefully, agonizingly slowly so as not to wake her daughter, Alara slipped the broken tablet out from under the pillow. It was a heavy, out-of-date model, the screen spiderwebbed with fine cracks. She gently carried it to the small desk lamp, shielding the light with her body. The tablet was surprisingly heavy. With trembling fingers, she pressed the power button. The old screen flickered to life, showing Serafina's favorite princess wallpaper. Alara intended to simply turn it off and put it back, but as her finger hovered over the screen, she noticed an icon. It was the icon for the video recording app. It was slightly highlighted, indicating it had been recently used or opened. Alara paused, her breath catching in her throat. Why would Serafina be using the video recorder on this old tablet? The new one had a vastly superior camera. With a sudden rush of cold certainty, Alara tapped the video folder. Her hand was shaking so badly she almost dropped the device. Inside the folder, there was only one file, labeled with a recent date. Alara stared at the single video file, her heart beating a frantic, uneven rhythm against her ribs. She hesitated, feeling a deep internal conflict. Was she violating her daughter's privacy? But the urgency, the desperation to save Serafina from Malachi's scheme, overrode her guilt. This was Serafina's secret, hidden from her father, and it might be the only weapon she had left. With a final, desperate resolve, Alara tapped the play button. The screen immediately filled with darkness, then a small, shaky image came into view. The camera angle was low, aimed slightly upward, suggesting the tablet was placed on a piece of furniture or the floor. The setting was the brightly lit living room, and the date stamp confirmed the video was recorded just 2 days after Malachi filed for divorce. The audio, however, was immediately clear and sharp. First, she heard Malachi's voice sounding deceptively sweet and controlled. He was addressing Serafina, who was apparently sitting just out of view. "Princess, remember what Daddy told you. Mommy is very, very sick," Malachi said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "And when people are sick in their head, they get angry and sad for no reason. Do you remember when Mommy yelled at you at the mall?" Serafina's small voice, tentative and confused, answered, "Yes, Daddy, but she was scared because I almost touched the wrong railing." No, Serafina," Malachi interrupted smoothly, his tone instantly becoming firmer, colder. "That's just what sick people say. The truth is, Mommy is not well and she makes you sad. Do you want to be sad all the time?" "No, Daddy," Serafina whispered. "Good girl. Now, when we go to court, you have to tell the nice judge that you love your daddy more because he buys you nice things and he is always happy. You have to tell the judge that Mommy is always crying and sometimes mean, okay? That way, Mommy can go rest and get better, and you can live with Daddy and get all the new toys you want. We are doing this to help Mommy understand." There was a long pause, filled only with the sound of a rustling object, perhaps Serafina nervously fidgeting with her clothes. Then Serafina's voice, smaller than before, asked, "But if I say that, will Mommy be alone?" "That's not your job to worry about, Princess," Malachi replied, a note of impatience creeping in. "Your job is to be a good girl and tell the judge what Daddy tells you, and never, ever tell Mommy about our special secret conversations. They are just for us, right? It's too confusing for sick Mommy." The camera then shifted violently, as if the tablet had been suddenly moved. Alara realized the tablet hadn't been on the floor. Serafina had cleverly set it up against a cushion or a stack of books, recording covertly. The video now showed Malachi's face clearly as he stood up. He was smiling that chilling, predatory smile. He reached out and gently stroked Serafina's hair, but his eyes were calculating and cold. "Now, go play with your new tablet. Put that old broken thing away where Mommy can't see it. We don't need it anymore." The last thing Alara saw before the video abruptly cut out was Serafina quickly scooping up the tablet and running off screen, clutching it tightly. Alara dropped the tablet onto the cushion, her hands shaking so violently she felt sick. The cold evidence of Malachi's grotesque manipulation and emotional abuse was now undeniable. He wasn't just divorcing her, he was actively, psychologically coaching their 7-year-old daughter to lie under oath, framing it as an act of kindness to a sick mother, all while isolating her from Alara. And Serafina, in her small, desperate way, knew this was wrong. She hadn't thrown away the old tablet, she had hidden it. She had recorded the evidence because, even at 7, she understood something terrible was happening, and she instinctively needed proof. Alara knew she had to show this to Attorney Abernathy tonight. This video wasn't just a revelation. It was a devastating indictment of Malachi's character and a perfect rebuttal to Dr. Valen's testimony. She quickly put the old tablet back under Serafina's pillow, kissed her sleeping daughter, and then, without even stopping to change out of her pajamas, she grabbed her purse and ran out the front door, hailing a cab toward Attorney Abernathy's modest office. It was close to midnight when Alara arrived, breathless and frantic. She knocked urgently on the office door until Abernathy, who lived nearby, finally answered, looking rumpled and surprised in a t-shirt and sweatpants. "Alara, what on earth?" "Attorney, look, I found it." "I have the proof." Alara thrust the cracked tablet into his hands. Abernathy looked at the device, then at Alara's wild, desperate eyes. He led her inside, his curiosity immediately outweighing his exhaustion. Alara quickly explained the significance of the old, broken tablet and why Serafina had kept it hidden. Abernathy played the video. As Malachi's cold, manipulative voice filled the small, silent office, Abernathy's tired eyes widened, his calm demeanor melting into stunned disbelief. He watched the short clip twice, then a third time, his mouth set in a thin, hard line. "My God, Alara," he breathed, turning off the device. This is a game changer. This proves coercion. This shows Malachi instructing Serafina to lie and coaching her to believe you are unstable. The moment this is introduced, Malachi's credibility and that of his expert, Dr. Valen, will be utterly destroyed. "Can we use it?" Alara asked, her voice trembling with hope and fear. "It's a secret recording. Normally, state laws can be tricky about secret recordings, but since the conversation is about child custody and it's Malachi deliberately manipulating and coercing a minor, his own daughter, to commit perjury, the judge will have to consider it," Abernathy said firmly. More importantly, it directly refutes the professional opinion of Dr. Valen, suggesting that Malachi fabricated the instability narrative and that the child is being alienated. "We can use this, Alara. We must use this." Abernathy spent the rest of the night creating a flawless legal strategy. He had the video immediately transferred, authenticated, and prepared as an exhibit for the next day's court session. Alara sat beside him, the rush of adrenaline keeping her awake, finally feeling a sense of vindication, a hope stronger than her despair. The next morning, Alara walked into the courtroom feeling an inner strength she hadn't known she possessed. Malachi, sitting next to Attorney Cromwell, looked supremely confident, ready to finalize his victory. Dr. Valen was also present, sitting in the back row with a smug, knowing look. The session began with Attorney Cromwell summarizing his evidence, reiterating Alara's supposed instability and the damage she was doing to Serafina. He concluded with a confident request for an immediate ruling in Malachi's favor regarding sole custody. When it was Attorney Abernathy's turn, he did not waste time. He stood slowly, his face resolute. "Your Honor," Abernathy began, his voice calm but commanding, "the plaintiff's case rests entirely on two foundational pillars. First, the testimony and expert opinion of Dr. Veronica Valen, who claims my client is an emotionally volatile mother, and second, the implication that the minor child, Serafina, is alienated from her mother and prefers to live with her stable father." Abernathy paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the silent room. "We have new evidence, Your Honor," Abernathy continued, walking toward the court's presentation screen. "Evidence that directly and irrefutably dismantles both of those pillars. Evidence that my client, Mrs. Alara, only discovered last night. It will reveal the true nature of Mr. Malachi's attempts to poison his daughter's mind and alienate her from her mother." Attorney Cromwell immediately jumped up, his face flushed with surprise and anger. "Objection, Your Honor, this is blatant fabrication. My client has never coerced the child, and this alleged evidence is almost certainly illegally obtained." "Your Honor, we only received this evidence late last night, directly from the minor child who was recording a private conversation between herself and her father because she was confused and distressed by his demands," Abernathy stated, his tone unwavering. "It is critical evidence showing coercion and parental alienation directly related to the child's well-being. I ask the court to view this evidence in camera immediately." The judge, intrigued and sensing the gravity of the situation, pondered for a moment. "Overruled, Mr. Abernathy, you may present your evidence. But I want to see the original device after this viewing." Abernathy gave Alara a brief, meaningful glance. He then walked to the court technician, inserted the flash drive, and the large presentation screen in the courtroom flickered to life. The shaky, low-angle video began to play. The courtroom fell into an absolute, suffocating silence. As Malachi's smooth, manipulative voice filled the room, carefully instructing Serafina to tell the nice judge that you love your daddy more, and to say that mommy is very, very sick in her head, Malachi's face went from pale to a deep, apoplectic red. Attorney Cromwell beside him seemed to deflate, his expensive composure cracking instantly. When the video showed Malachi's cold, calculated smile as he told Serafina their secret conversation was just for us to help Mommy, Alara heard gasps from the gallery. The judge watched the entire clip with an expression that turned from professional neutrality to profound disgust. When the clip ended, he slammed his gavel down with a sharp, explosive sound that made everyone jump. "Silence, absolute silence," the judge commanded, his voice booming with authority. "Mr. Malachi approached the bench. "Mr. Cromwell, you as well." Malachi stumbled forward, visibly sweating, his tailored suit suddenly looking too tight. "Your Honor, this is taken out of context. I was merely trying to help her understand the situation gently. Help her understand, Mr. Malachi." The judge scorned, his eyes flashing with indignation. "You were coaching a 7-year-old child to lie under oath, telling her you were doing it for her mother's sickness. That is not help, that is calculated emotional abuse and parental alienation. This court takes attempted perjury and child coercion with the utmost seriousness." The judge turned to Attorney Cromwell. "Mr. Cromwell, you based your entire case for sole custody on the instability of Mrs. Alara. Given this evidence, the credibility of your client and any testimony supporting his claims is now highly suspect." Cromwell, recovering slightly, quickly pointed a finger toward the back row. "Your Honor, this is still unauthenticated, and Dr. Valen's independent professional testimony." Before he could finish, Alara's memory flashed back to the scent of perfume. This was her chance. She interrupted, her voice ringing with newfound clarity and courage. "Your Honor," Alara stated, addressing the judge directly, "the expert witness, Dr. Veronica Valen, is not an independent professional. She is Malachi's mistress. She is the woman he left me for, and she fabricated that entire clinical report to destroy me." The courtroom erupted in stunned chatter. Dr. Valen, sitting in the back, immediately shot up, looking horrified, clearly realizing the game was over. "Objection, Your Honor, pure defamation." Cromwell shouted desperately. "Let us find out," the judge said dryly. He fixed his gaze on Dr. Valen. Dr. Valen approached the stand immediately. "You are under oath." Dr. Valen stumbled forward, her professional composure now completely gone. She sat down, her elegant appearance marred by fear. Attorney Abernathy, sensing blood, stood up for an impromptu cross-examination. "Dr. Valen, you testified that your observations were objective and professional. Is it true that you are currently involved in a romantic relationship with the plaintiff, Malachi?" Dr. Valen's eyes darted frantically to Malachi, who was shaking his head violently behind his lawyer. She hesitated, her breathing shallow. "No, that is absolutely not true. I am his professional consultant." Abernathy leaned in. "Dr. Valen, Alara can testify that she smelled your specific perfume on Malachi's shirt when he returned late one evening after an unscheduled trip to an amusement park with Serafina, a trip Alara was not informed of. Can you confirm or deny that you were present with Malachi and Serafina at Wonderland Park on the evening of November 15th? Dr. Valen's face was chalk white. The connection was too specific, too easily verified. I may have met with Mr. Malachi briefly on that evening to discuss the case findings, counselor. Did you meet him at the amusement park, doctor? Were you having a professional consultation while riding the roller coasters and buying stuffed unicorns? Abernathy pressed relentlessly. Your Honor, I plead the fifth, Dr. Valen stammered, covering her face. I accept your refusal to answer as an admission of a conflict of interest, doctor, the judge declared, his face stern. Your entire testimony is struck from the record. Furthermore, I am referring your file to the State Medical Board for a thorough investigation into professional misconduct and fraud. Dr. Valen burst into tears, her elegant professional facade utterly shattered. Malachi's case collapsed instantly. His financial documents, the staged photos, and the expert testimony, the entire foundation of his attempt to destroy Alara, were now revealed as a web of malicious, premeditated lies. The judge turned to Malachi, his voice heavy with condemnation. Mr. Malachi, your actions constitute an egregious attempt to manipulate the court and emotionally damage your child. Your request for sole custody is not only denied, but I am placing an immediate restriction on your visitation rights until a full psychological assessment is completed. This court will not tolerate the emotional abuse of a minor child. Malachi looked like a man who had lost everything in a single, devastating moment. He slumped back into his chair, defeated. Alara sat, feeling a profound wave of relief and justice wash over her. It wasn't over, but the most crucial battle had been won, all thanks to Serafina's small, intuitive secret. The judge, however, was not finished. He addressed Attorney Abernathy. Mr. Abernathy, I have concerns regarding the financial instability of your client, Mrs. Ilara resulting from the plaintiff's unilateral draining of the joint accounts. This is a clear case of economic abuse. The judge continued, addressing attorney Abernathy. The court finds that Mr. Malachi's actions, including the systematic draining of the joint accounts and the use of marital funds for luxury items for his mistress, purchases he then attempted to blame on Mrs. Ilara, constitutes clear economic abuse and deliberate financial sabotage. This is unacceptable and must be rectified immediately. He then turned to Malachi, his voice now cold with legal precision. Mr. Malachi, I am issuing a temporary financial injunction. All marital assets are frozen immediately. Furthermore, pending final judgment, you will be required to pay Mrs. Ilara immediate spousal support and child support sufficient to secure new, safe accommodation for herself and Serafina, along with funds to retain an independent financial auditor to trace all marital assets you covertly moved. Malachi's face was a mask of shock and fury. He opened his mouth to protest, but Attorney Cromwell swiftly laid a restraining hand on his arm, whispering urgently in his ear. Cromwell knew when they were beaten. The judge confirmed custody, based on the demonstrated emotional stability of the mother, Mrs. Ilara, under immense duress and the attempted manipulation by the father. Primary physical custody of the minor child, Serafina, is temporarily granted to Mrs. Ilara. The child will immediately reside with her mother in a new, secure residence, pending the full psychological evaluation of Mr. Malachi. The gavel slammed down again. The court is adjourned until the full asset audit is complete. Ilara sat completely stunned. She hadn't just won custody, she had won the right to fight Malachi on equal financial ground. She looked across the courtroom. Malachi stood up, gathering his papers, his eyes burning with vengeful hate as he stared at her. Attorney Abernathy quickly ushered Ilara out of the courtroom before Malachi could approach her. In the hallway, Ilara broke down, not in fear but in overwhelming relief. We did it, attorney. We actually did it. No, Ilara, Abernathy corrected, a warm smile finally breaking his professional reserve. Serafina did it. That little girl is unbelievably smart and brave. She saved her own mother. That evening, Ilara went home to face Malachi one last time. He was packing his bags, his movements jerky and aggressive. He had clearly received the judge's order and was consumed by rage. You think you've won, Ilara? Malachi sneered, throwing a handful of expensive ties into a suitcase. You may have the house now, but you will never have the power. You are nothing but a dependent housewife. You'll spend every dime of that support money and then you'll be back to nothing. Ilara, however, was no longer afraid. She stood tall, holding her head high. Your lies are over, Malachi. The court knows the truth. You tried to destroy me and emotionally abuse your own daughter to keep your mistress close. You failed. Malachi took a menacing step toward her. You exposed Veronica. You ruined her career. You'll pay for that, Ilara. I didn't expose her, Malachi. You did when you chose to bring your mistress into a custody case as a paid liar. And I didn't ruin her career. Her own dishonesty did that. Now leave. For the first time in years, Ilara saw genuine shock in his eyes. He realized she was no longer the meek, terrified wife. He had broken her, but in doing so, he had forged her into something stronger. When Serafina came home from school, Abernathy had arranged for her to stay with a trusted friend until Ilara secured a new place. Malachi was gone. Ilara knelt, holding her daughter tightly. We're going to get a new apartment, just the two of us, a place where we can be happy and safe, where Mommy can bake cookies whenever she wants. Serafina hugged her back fiercely. I love you, Mommy. She then looked up at her mother with wide, honest eyes. I was so scared, but Daddy kept asking me to say you were sick. That's why I recorded it. I thought if I showed it to you, you could get better. I knew my old tablet was the only one he wouldn't check. Ilara gently kissed her forehead. You don't ever have to worry about being scared again, Princess. You were so brave. With the immediate spousal support and the court's protective orders, Ilara secured a small, charming apartment across town. It was modest, but it was theirs. It was filled with sunlight and, most importantly, laughter. Attorney Abernathy, now fully funded for the asset audit, went to work. The audit revealed a shocking pattern. Not only had Malachi drained the joint accounts, but he had also used substantial company funds and marital capital to set up Dr. Veronica Valen in her practice. Malachi had spent months forging or financing every aspect of her fake professional life. The high-end purchases Ilara was blamed for were gifts Malachi bought for Veronica. He hadn't just used Veronica to lie, he had financially engineered her entire identity to serve as a weapon in the divorce. The final hearing was anticlimactic. Faced with incontrovertible evidence of fraud, perjury, economic abuse, and attempted child coercion, Malachi's entire legal strategy crumbled. Attorney Cromwell tried to negotiate a settlement, but Abernathy was relentless. The judge's final ruling was devastating for Malachi. The judge's final ruling was a comprehensive victory for Alara, reflecting the court's deep disapproval of Malachi's actions. The court awarded Alara the majority of the marital assets, including the primary residence, recognizing her non-monetary contributions to the marriage and ruling that the financial assets Malachi had drained must be repaid from his business holdings. The spousal support was set at a significant, long-term amount, acknowledging the years Alara sacrificed her career at Malachi's request. Furthermore, Malachi was ordered to pay full child support and cover all of Serafina's educational and medical expenses. The judge permanently granted sole physical and legal custody of Serafina to Alara. Malachi was restricted to supervised visitation only, contingent upon him completing an extensive, mandatory court-approved program for anger management, parental alienation awareness, and individual psychological therapy. The court also levied a heavy fine against Malachi for attempting to subvert the legal process through fraudulent testimony. As for Dr. Veronica Valen, the judge ensured the state medical board received all the evidence, leading to a swift revocation of her license and the opening of a criminal investigation into perjury and fraud. Malachi's scheme had not only failed to destroy Alara but had successfully destroyed his own reputation, career, and freedom. Alara and Serafina watched Malachi's downfall from a distance, focusing on rebuilding their new life. Their small apartment quickly became a haven of peace and genuine affection. Alara, empowered by her legal victory and financial stability, decided it was time to reclaim her own identity. She returned to her original career path, marketing and public relations, using her skills to help small, ethical businesses. She started small, working from home while Serafina was at school, but the confidence she gained in the courtroom fueled her ambition. She was not just a survivor, she was a woman who had fought a powerful, wealthy manipulator and won. 6 months after the final ruling, Alara and Serafina were thriving. Alara had found her footing professionally, and Serafina, freed from the confusing emotional pressure of her father, was happier and more stable than ever. One evening, Alara was tucking Serafina into bed when her daughter looked up at her, holding her close. "Mommy," Serafina said, a slight furrow in her brow. "That night, why did I record Daddy talking?" Alara smiled gently. "Because you knew it was wrong, sweetheart. You knew it was Daddy trying to make you sad. You recorded it because you are incredibly smart and very, very brave. You were protecting us both." Serafina nodded, a look of profound realization crossing her face. "So, I wasn't just hiding an old tablet. I was hiding the truth." "Exactly," Alara whispered, kissing her forehead, "and the truth always wins." Alara eventually bought a small house of her own, a cheerful place with a garden where Serafina could play freely. She often thought about Attorney Abernathy, who had refused to take a large fee, insisting that watching Alara win custody was payment enough. He had believed in her when no one else would. She realized that Malachi's attempts to frame her as a failed mother and wife had ironically led her to become the strongest, most independent version of herself. She had stepped out of his shadow and into the sunlight, transforming the vast, cold emptiness of her old life into a warm, secure future built on her own terms. She never needed Malachi's money or his approval. All she ever truly needed was her own resilience and the fierce, protective love for her daughter, a love that Serafina, in the end, returned with a single, secret video. The cracked screen of that old tablet became their quiet symbol of victory. Final note from the narrator: thank you for watching Alara and Serafina's incredible story of survival and triumph. If this journey of finding strength in the face of betrayal moved you, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, if you want to hear more stories of resilience, justice, and the truth prevailing against all odds, be sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Until next time.